When people hear the word demons, they imagine something extreme, trauma, pathology, something dramatic buried deep in the past. But most psychological demons don't form that way. In real life, they usually start in very ordinary situations. A thought appears, or a feeling. Sometimes it feels silly. Sometimes it feels genuinely threatening. At that point, nothing is wrong yet. That part is important. The thought itself is not the problem. The problem begins with how the thought is handled. Most demons take birth when a thought or emotion is left unresolved and detached from reality. That can happen in two ways. Either the thought is dismissed as unimportant, or it's treated as too threatening to confront. Both lead to the same outcome: postponement without feedback. And postponement is not neutral. Take self-doubt. Someone thinks, "I'm not sure I can do this." That's a normal thought. Everyone has it. If the person tries anyway, reality responds. They either fail, partially succeed, or realize the task wasn't what they imagined. In all cases, uncertainty collapses. The thought changes shape. But many people don't do that. They postpone. They tell themselves they need more preparation, better timing, more confidence. That feels responsible, even mature. But what actually happens is that uncertainty stays open. And when uncertainty stays open, the mind fills the gap with imagination. The doubt comes back stronger, not because it's true, but because it has never been corrected. That's how the seed is planted. The same thing happens with suspicion. A husband notices something small, a delayed reply, a change in tone, something slightly off. On its own, that means nothing. But instead of asking or checking, he lets the thought sit. Asking feels awkward, insecure, maybe even humiliating. So instead of clarifying, he starts interpreting, watching, connecting dots. Suspicion grows not because of evidence, but because reality was never allowed to respond. Fear of approaching women works the same way. It often starts as a mild discomfort, the idea that it might be awkward or uncomfortable. Instead of acting once and learning, the person avoids. Avoidance protects the ego in the short term. No rejection, no embarrassment. But it also blocks feedback. And without feedback, imagination takes over. The mind rehearses rejection, humiliation, failure. Over time, the fear spreads. What started as hesitation becomes anxiety, overthinking, and eventually paralysis. The demon didn't arrive suddenly. It grew because reality was never consulted. This is the core mechanism behind psychological demons. They grow when thoughts are overthought, postponed, or detached from real-world testing. Reality corrects imagination. Imagination left alone multiplies. That's why some people are more fertile ground for demons than others. Not because they're weak or unintelligent, but because they rely on thinking where action is required. They overthink instead of testing. They detach instead of engaging. They deny or delay feedback because short-term discomfort feels unbearable. Ego quietly supports this because avoidance preserves self-image. If you never try, you never fail. If you never ask, you're never rejected. If you never verify, you're never embarrassed. And demons thrive in that environment. Once a thought isn't resolved, the mind starts monitoring it. Monitoring keeps it active. Repetition builds structure. The thought connects to other thoughts, then to emotions, then to behavior. Eventually, it stops being, "Can I do this?" and becomes, "I'm not that kind of person." At that point, the demon occupies real space in the subconscious. It feels autonomous because it now runs automatically. When people reach this stage, they usually respond in predictable ways. Some fight the demon. They try to suppress thoughts, force confidence, overpower fear. This works briefly. Then the demon returns stronger. Suppression teaches the brain that the thought is dangerous, and danger demands vigilance. Vigilance keeps it alive. Others avoid the demon. They shrink their lives. They lower exposure, reduce ambition, choose safety over friction. Life becomes calmer, but smaller. The demon doesn't need to attack anymore. It has already shaped the boundaries of the person's life. Some people feed the demon. They overanalyze, overprepare, constantly check. It feels productive, even intelligent. But nothing resolves. The demon consumes attention without producing clarity. In some cases, the demon stops feeling like a part at all. It becomes the default. The person doesn't say, "I'm afraid." They say, "I can't." The demon no longer argues. It dictates. Now here's the part that's almost never explained properly. The same snowballing mechanism that creates demons also creates confidence, competence, and emotional stability. The system is neutral. A positive snowball starts when action happens early enough for reality to respond. Most people think confidence comes from belief. It doesn't. Confidence comes from collapsed uncertainty. Here's how it actually forms. Someone feels unsure about something: public speaking, approaching women, asserting themselves, starting a project. The uncertainty appears first. That's unavoidable. If they wait until they feel confident, uncertainty stays open. Imagination takes over. Fear grows. But if they act early, even badly, reality responds. They might fail. They might get rejected. They might look awkward. And that feels worse than avoidance in the short term. But something crucial happens. Uncertainty collapses. They realize rejection is survivable. Embarrassment is temporary. Most outcomes are neutral. Fear doesn't vanish instantly, but it shrinks, because the mind now has data. Imagination loses authority. That's the beginning of positive snowballing. The same thing happens with competence. Someone doubts whether they're capable of doing a job or building a skill. If they postpone, doubt becomes identity. If they start clumsily, feedback arrives. They see what actually needs work. Progress becomes measurable. Doubt turns into calibration. Instead of, "I'm not good enough," the thought becomes, "This part needs work." That shift matters. One is identity-based. The other is task-based. Positive snowballs don't feel good at first. They often feel uncomfortable, messy, and exposing. But they accelerate. Once feedback is regular, imagination weakens. Hesitation decreases. Action becomes easier. Not because fear disappears, but because fear stops being in charge. Ego plays a role here too. Ego feeds negative snowballs by avoiding humiliation. But ego can also adapt. When someone repeatedly survives failure, rejection, and imperfection, ego updates. It becomes less fragile. That's not confidence as bravado. That's confidence as resilience. And resilience snowballs just like fear does, through repetition. This also explains why people who seem naturally confident often aren't special. They just entered feedback loops earlier. They acted before they felt ready. They failed before they overthought. They let reality respond before imagination took over. Over time, this compounds. From the outside, it looks like personality. It isn't. It's accumulation. So when we talk about demons, it's important to say this clearly. Demons are not proof that something is wrong with you. They are proof that something has been avoided for too long. And confidence is not proof that someone is fearless. It's proof that fear was met early, before it had time to grow. If there's one idea to leave this with, it's this. The mind snowballs in the direction of first contact. Early contact creates confidence. Delayed contact creates demons. Not because of strength, not because of morality, but because feedback changes the system. And if conversations like this matter to you, if you're trying to live a little more honestly in a noisy world, consider subscribing. Not for more noise, but for more moments like this.